All right, welcome. My name is Kylie Gunkopf. I'm with the Kirkwood Corporate Training Team. I am a program developer and I help organize these webinars with many of our great trainers. Thank you so much for joining us today via Zoom or Facebook Live. We are so excited to have you guys here with us for another great webinar. Today we have Dan Ebener with us, the owner of Quad City Leadership Consulting. He's a professor of leadership at St. Ambrose University, and he actually just finished writing his 5th leadership book titled Leadership for the Greater Good, a textbook for leaders. Today's webinar is based on that book, some of the materials you can find in there. Today is part 1 of a 2-part series on adaptive leadership. Today's topic specifically will approach leadership as a voluntary, interactive process that creates adaptive change. Part 2 will be held on February 10th, also going to be via Zoom, so feel free to go ahead and get registered for that. We will have more information at the end of today's presentation on how to participate in that webinar. But that topic is on emotional skills for leadership. Just a quick reminder for our Zoom users, throughout today's presentation, feel free to submit any questions. You can use that chat feature or the Q&A feature. After the presentation, again, for those who joined us via Zoom, we will be taking your questions. And then we will be posting a recording of today's session on our social media after we work our magic and add closed captioning and all of those good things. Thank you again for joining us. Dan, please feel free to please feel free to start whenever you're ready.
All right, thank you very much, Kylie. And thanks everybody for joining me on this beautiful December day in Iowa, right? It's fun to be with you and to have this opportunity to talk about my favorite topic, leadership. So my mission in life is to change the way we lead and manage. And I feel passionate about that because I've heard from so many of my students and have experienced myself and other colleagues, just how important it is to have good leadership and good management in our organizations. A good friend of mine, Borna Jalsenjak, and I have been teaching in Croatia for the last 10 years. And for the last 5 years, we've been talking about writing our own textbook. And you might say, well, why another textbook? There's already leadership textbooks out there. Well, so Borna and I have been looking for just the right textbook, and we just couldn't find it. And here are some of the reasons why. So number one, the world is increasingly complex, and a lot of the leadership textbooks that we have, that we've tried using, just don't address the complexity of, like adaptive challenges, which we're going to talk about in a few moments. They don't have a consistent definition of leadership. Most of them begin by talking about leadership as being something that's not a position of authority, but then throughout the book, they talk about leadership as if it's only a position of authority. Number 3, they spend hundreds of pages covering traditional theories from the 70s, 80s, and 90s without really an effort to bring them into the 21st century, which is part of what we try to do in this book. And fourthly, we wanted to kind of, look at, how can leadership really be used for the benefit of the greater good of society. So looking at, the ways that business can assist people and profits and planet. That's kind of another sub-theme in the whole book. And then finally, plain and concise language. My publisher, my editor, they told me that people are looking for shorter sentences, shorter paragraphs, shorter chapters, and a shorter book, and so that's what we try to do, is just put leadership into plain language. So this is the interactive part of my first part of my presentation. I want to play this little word association game with you. So very quickly, and you can put these in the chat room, and Kylie's going to read some of them to me. I say leadership. What do you say? So what words or phrases come to mind when you hear the word leadership? Go ahead and type some of those words or phrases in to the chat room, and I'd love to hear what some of your initial thoughts about leadership are. So what words or phrases do you equate with leadership?
So we're getting a lot of them in here. We have visionary, facilitator, team,
okay,
supportive.
All right. Visionary, facilitator, team. Sounds like some of my students are on this call, okay? We might have some ringers out there, Kylie. So yeah, so vision, we're gonna talk about that a little bit when we get to the strategy skills. Facilitator, yeah, obviously, you know, good facilitation skills, dialogical skills are critical to leadership. Team, yes, if you don't have a team, you can't lead, right? Leadership is not something you do all by yourself.
Yeah, then we also have supportive, empowers others, steers the ship,
Okay.
inspires, role
Okay,
model.
supports, inspires, steers the ship. Yeah, so a lot of this supporting and inspiring, these are some of the things that leaders do, right? So people who've taken the leadership practices inventory know those are some of the key practices of leadership and of management, quite frankly. What else you got there, Kylie?
Someone I want to follow,
Okay,
challenging, servant or
challenge.
serving, communication.
All right, let's slow down here. So, all right, so serving, we're going to talk a little bit about servant leadership. That's been one of the things I've written a lot about. Okay, so serving is part of leadership too, I think. So putting other people's needs and interests ahead of your own and serving a mission or a cause can be really critical to leadership. What else? Oh, encouraging and challenging. These are like all coming out of the leadership practices inventory, which is, this is great, okay? Anything else?
Yeah, we've got removing barriers. And then we got another suggestion that says sometimes not leading.
Sometimes not leading, absolutely, because sometimes, you know, when you're practicing leadership, it's important to step back and create space for other people to lead. So, you know, leadership can actually be an activity that you exchange with followers. So different people can step up and other people step back, right? And so leadership and followership become this dance that is done by a group of people where different people step up at different times, depending on what the role and what the responsibility is. All right, thanks. That gives me a good idea as to a starting point. So let me share with you my starting point. This is my definition of leadership, or ours, born in mind. We talk about it being a voluntary, interactive process. We're going to talk more about what those words mean. And it intends adaptive change. We'll speak about that. Note that in the first part of this graphic, the communication lines go both ways. So in management and in authority relationships, oftentimes, you know, the communication can just go in one direction. But in leadership, not so much. It's got to go both directions. In fact, it should go multiple directions. It goes up and down and sideways to peers. And so it's got to be collaborative. Note also that leaders and followers, as we were just saying, they can exchange positions, okay? So not so much true with management, right? Because I can't just walk in and say, hey, I think I'll be the boss today, right? How's that gonna work? So yeah, someone has to authorize you to be the boss, but no one has to authorize you to be a leader, okay? Leadership is a choice. It's a choice that you can enter into anytime you feel passionate about wanting to change something and you begin to influence other people to join you, you're leading. All right, so like management, leadership has this dual focus. Number one is achieving results. We'll call that the task. And number two is developing the relationship. Okay, that's supportive, encouraging, and challenging aspects that you were talking about. And the key here is that it really takes both, and it takes a sophisticated approach, a balanced approach, to not swerve too much one way or the other, right? So we realize that one of the ways we achieve results is by building relationships. And one of the ways we build relationships is by actually getting things done and by accomplishing a mission. So on the relationship side of leadership, we talk about voluntary. That means it can't be coerced. People are in it because they want to be a part of this change process. And it's interactive, meaning the communication goes in lots of different directions, okay? And that's that facilitating role that someone mentioned, right? So being a facilitator, being interactive is important on the relational side of leadership. The task side of leadership, as I see it, is it's all about change. You know, if you're not changing something, you're not leading. And we're going to talk about adaptive change as a specific kind of change that leadership in the 21st century needs to create. So one of the main themes of all my books really is that leadership is an activity that anyone can embrace, okay? With or without a position of authority, with or without a title or a position. It's not a promotion, it's a choice. It's your choice when you choose to lead. So that doesn't mean that when you have a position of authority, you cannot lead. No, of course you can. You can lead with authority, you can lead without authority. It's just two different kind of pathways to get there. All right, so another theme in all my books is that organizations need leadership at all levels because organizations need change. Let's face it, folks, the world itself needs change. You know, I hear stories from my students and from my colleagues and from people in my workshops about, just some, really bad managerial practices out there. And we tend to call management leadership and we get all this stuff mixed up. And, a lot of people are just not happy at work. Leadership is the kind of process that can engage people so that they actually enjoy going to work. And the business can become more successful. I get CEOs who ask me to come in and do leadership trainings because they say they want their people to lead, not to manage. And what they mean, I think, by that is they want their people in positions of authority to interact with their subordinates, with the people, with their direct reports in such a way that engages people, that invites and inspires and influences them in these non-coercive, voluntary relationships so that there's actually buy-in and there's intrinsic motivation at work, okay? So one of the bottom lines here is that without change, there's no leadership, and without leadership, there's no change, at least not the adaptive change that we're going to discuss. So what do we mean by these adaptive challenges? So an adaptive challenge, and this work comes from a guy named Ronald Heifetz, they're the kind of challenges in a workplace that cry out for leadership, okay? There's no easy solutions to an adaptive challenge. There's no technical way to just fix it. Usually what we're talking about are changes in a culture, changes in attitude and behavior, things that are more difficult, that can't just be changed by edict, okay? They can't be dictated. It requires this voluntary, interactive engagement of people and this activity that we're going to call leadership. So a little history lesson. In the industrial era, okay, I grew up in a small town in Illinois where there was a cement factory, and most of the men in town went to work at 6 o'clock in the morning. They got done by 3 o'clock in the afternoon. They drank beer for 2 hours. We actually had 33 bars in a town of 4,200 people, okay? This was their daily activity, all right? They went to work from 6 to 3, they drank from 3 to 5, and then they went home, okay? They were working in factories. They didn't need to be supervised. Their employers were not looking for their brains, their minds, okay? They were really just looking for their bodies. Their opinions didn't matter. They weren't important because the boss had all the answers. If something broke on the assembly line, the bosses knew how to fix it. And in that era, leadership was equated with good management, okay? And back in the industrial era, roughly 70 or 80% of the American people at the height of the industrial era were working in factories, okay? And now only like 7 or 8% of the American people work in factories. We're in this post-industrial era where the world has completely changed. And therefore, the way we lead and the way we manage has to change. The world's become more globalized and more complex. There's much more cultural diversity that requires the kind of dialogical skills that are required of leadership in the 21st century. Technology has taken the place of a lot of the work that people used to do in factories. But the work that is done in factories today uses highly sophisticated technology where the bosses don't necessarily have the answers when the technology is not working, and they need to talk to the people closest to the problem to try to fix what's going wrong. And I also mentioned decline of family and religion because we've become a more individualistic society, okay? And leadership at its core is a collective activity. You can't lead without a team, okay? If you don't need other people, that's not leadership. If you're doing something completely by yourself, that's not leadership. And then finally, yes, the pace of change itself has changed in this post-industrial society. So the challenges in the workplace are changing, and because they are more adaptive in nature, we need more leadership, okay? We need people to lead change and not just to manage change. By managing change, what I mean is this is where people in positions of authority decide what the change is going to be, they dictate it, and then people down the line have to manage and implement that change. Now, so a technical fix, if there is a technical problem, the idea is to fix it. This is where you have a known solution, and you just have to apply that solution. And this is something that management can still do, even in the post-industrial era. Adaptive issues, on the other hand, need to be led and managed. So an example of these technical versus adaptive problems, like let's say you have a back problem. Okay, so a technical fix might be a pill, okay? It might be medication, or it might be surgery in a worst case scenario. But to get at the core root of a back problem, you have to do the adaptive work. You have to change your patterns of behavior. You might have to change the way you sit and stand and walk, okay, and lift things. Another example that brings it to the workplace is, when people are tardy. There's a technical fix to people being late, okay? You can write them up, okay? Or you can put a time clock at the entrance to the workplace, okay? Those are technical fixes. An adaptive work with tardiness would be sitting down and talking to the person and saying, so, what's going on in your life? Why is it that you're being late? I would suggest that working from home, as we have been doing, many of us, for the last 10 months, has created all kinds of new adaptive challenges in the workplace. So this is kind of the way to summarize this difference. And I'm just going to pick out a couple of these to comment on right now. But on the technical fix, basically an authority figure or an expert can usually solve a technical problem. The solutions can even be implemented by edict or by command, by dictation, okay? Adaptive change, on the other hand, has to involve the people closest to the problem. They're the ones that can see what really is going on and can provide insights that a lot of times the people in positions of authority don't see. And it takes longer to implement adaptive change, okay? It's more sophisticated kind of work. Now, if it is a technical problem, by all means fix it, okay? However, I would suggest the most important issues today tend to be more adaptive in nature. And in the industrial era, we lived in this culture of tell, where the people in positions of authority, the managers, could just tell people what to do. But I would suggest that we've entered now into an era where we need to establish more of a culture of asking and then listening instead of telling, okay? Which is what we talk about in dialogical leadership, okay? This is dialogical leadership is where we enter into two-way exchanges with people, okay? Where we open up opportunities to see a problem from a new perspective or from someone else's point of view. And this is what builds trust that becomes critical for both leadership and management. It also uncovers multiple different ways to both look at the problem and to come up with possible solutions. And in the process, it increases engagement, which, by the way, engagement is, clearly the research is showing that engagement is a real key to successful leadership and management, okay? It's become a major theme in all 5 of my books. And neuroscience is teaching us that people are looking for more of a sense of purpose and direction and connection, all of which are ways that we can engage people. Servant leadership, which someone mentioned earlier, is another way that the research shows you can engage people. Robert Greenleaf, the AT&T executive, was the one who coined this term. And he defines it as being motivated first to serve and then to lead. These are 3 of my books on servant leadership. The middle one is the one that's the bestseller. It's based on the Beatitudes of Jesus, like blessed are the poor in spirit, blessed are the meek, blessed are the peacemakers, etc. Now, transformational leadership is another one of the industrial era theories that I think has some relevance to the 21st century, okay? These are 4 ways that transformational leadership suggests that we can intrinsically motivate people. You can inspire them with mission and vision. You can stimulate their thinking by making the work more fun and interesting. You can be individually considerate of all the members of your team. And then the other part of this which is another whole workshop, idealized influence, is that you can also intrinsically motivate some people through charisma. Situational leadership is another good industrial era, quote unquote, leadership theory that I think has some applicability to the post-industrial era. It's actually a really good management tool. The gist of it is that when a person is not so willing and able to do the job, it's okay to tell them, okay? If I don't know how to use a copy machine and you tell me, okay, I'm motivated by that. But if I've used the copy machine 100 times, okay, and I get a new boss and they come in and tell me, here's how you use the copy machine, that's not so motivating. So the idea here is that as a person becomes more ready, willing, and able to do the job, you move from telling to selling to participating to delegating the responsibility back to them. So most of these industrial era leadership theories are really about good management. And management is key in today's world, okay? I don't want to in any way denigrate management as not being an important activity. It is. It's just different from leadership, okay? By definition, management is a position of authority. And managers provide the structure and order and control that we need in most businesses, in all businesses, all right? And management can also create the conditions for leadership to take place. Management can make all the difference as to whether you're going to see leadership practiced at all levels in your organization, because management can encourage leadership or discourage leadership by what they say and by what they do. All right. So then the last part of the book, and I want to move on here, is we basically are saying, okay, so how do we prepare our hearts and minds for this activity that we call leadership? And in the book, we cover 4 specific skills, okay, a chapter on each one. And the first is dialogical or communication skills. And at the core of communication skills is listening, okay? Probably the most important thing for leadership in the 21st century is to learn to listen and to get beyond the biased and distracted listening that is so predominant in our world today, to become active. That means opening your mind and your eyes and your ears to the other person. Open your heart by becoming more empathetic, and opening your will through what we call generative listening. Okay, this is Otto Scharmer's term for it, where you actually are willing to change what you're doing based on what the other person says. Then we have a chapter on emotional skills, okay? A lot on EI. We could do 8 hours easily on EI, and we are going to talk more about emotional intelligence on February 10th in the next seminar that we're going to cover, or the next webinar that we're going to have. And then thirdly, conflict skills. Conflict is so ubiquitous, it's so ever-present in all of our workplaces that we have a separate chapter just on how do we deal with conflict when we're leading and managing. And then finally, strategic skills, which basically is a chapter that summarizes the book that Fred Smith and I wrote several years ago on strategic planning. So, theme of my books, organizations need leadership because organizations need change. And if you feel passionate about wanting to change something, and you begin to invite, inspire, and influence others to join you, you're leading, all right? So thank you all very much. I really appreciate this opportunity to spend this time in December with you. This is a little information about the next webinar we have, and I'm going to turn it back over to Kylie to see what kind of questions or comments you have.
Sorry, it helps when I turn off my mute. One second, guys. I just want to thank you all for joining us today again. And I'd really like to thank our Facebook users for joining us specifically. If you would like to bring Dan or any of our trainers in-house on this topic or any other topic, feel free to give us a call. Our number is 319-398-5623, or you can send us an email at corporatetraining@kirkwood.edu. For those of you joining us via Zoom, please go ahead and submit your questions. Dan, we have one already, so we'll get to that here in a second. For our Facebook Live viewers, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to go ahead and end your live stream here shortly. Again, if you'd like to give Corporate Training a call to see if we can help you with any of your training needs, our phone number is 319-398-5623. All right. So Dan, we got a really great question from one of our Zoom attendees. Amy writes, as a leader, one of the struggles I've had with adaptive change is the amount of time it takes to allow the change to take root and the impact it has on others on the team that feel like nothing is being done with that one problem child on the team. When in reality, I am working on adaptive items in the background. Any suggestions on how to handle this?
Yeah, that's a great question, Amy. And I wish we had hours to address that because, yeah, so the adaptive work does take time. And I would, first of all, I'd recommend some of the books by Ron Heifetz and Marty Linsky. Marty Linsky also writes the foreword to our new book because they've got a lot of insights on this. So doing things like, thinking politically and getting up on the balcony, orchestrating the conflict, because all of these things do take time, right? So I would also suggest, Amy, that sometimes there are some low-hanging fruit, some technical aspects to problems that can kind of help buy some time. But generally speaking, I would say that if you involve people in the adaptive work, okay, Linsky and Heifetz talk about this as giving the work back, okay, giving the work over to them, engaging them in the process, really listening to their perspective, giving actually help, providing the support and the structure for them to lead the change. A lot of times that's the key. You gotta, get really close to the problem and talk to the people who are, in it every day. You've got to have patience because it's not gonna. These things are not going to change overnight. And generally speaking, you're gonna run into resistance. And I would suggest people don't resist change; they resist loss. And there's loss involved in most adaptive change, okay? And so what you have to do is you have to be transparent about that loss. What are you asking people to give up? You're asking them a lot of times to give up the security of the status quo, the security of knowing this is the way we do things around here. And so I think, people are less likely to resist the change that they choose, to resist the change they don't choose. And they're more willing to embrace change when they're involved in it. So I hope those are a few things that might help, Amy. But give me a call. We can talk about this much longer.
Great. Thank you so much. I really love the reminder that you gave us all about change just takes time, and that sometimes it's okay to be scared, and it's okay to resist it. And it's okay to ask yourself and to ask others, okay, what is the fear here? What do you think you're losing by this change? So I think those are always good reminders for us to think about when we have a lot of changes. And I think 2020 has been the year of change and adaptability.
Yeah, it requires what we call a patient impatience, right? You have to be impatient with the unfairness of the current situation. You have to be impatient with the wrongs that are committed because of the need for change. But you have to be patient with the process of bringing that change about. And so it's a patient impatience.
Love that. Is there any other questions from our participants that are still here with us? Now's a great time to ask it while we have Dan here to tackle it. Otherwise, Dan, I had a question as you were talking about this. It was kind of towards the beginning of your presentation. Historically speaking, leadership meant good management, just managing all of the people and all of the things, and really just, I think of an iron fist almost. So if we have some leaders that are still in that mindset that for me to manage my team, or for me to be a good leader of my team, I have to be micromanaging or being this kind of iron fist manager. How can you help somebody maybe get out of that rut or get unstuck from that concept and maybe see that management and leadership shouldn't always be hand in hand?
Yeah, that's a great question, Kylie. So I would suggest that, most people embrace the idea of participation in a decision-making process. They want to be involved. They want to have a say in changes that are going to directly affect their lives. And generally speaking, they don't want to be micromanaged. If you've got somebody who wants to be micromanaged, that's an anomaly. Okay, maybe it was a bad hire, quite frankly. Okay, because you should be hiring people who are ambitious, who are industrious, and who want challenges and seek them out and want to get better and want the organization to get better. That's what you should be looking for when you're hiring. And a lot of times we hire people for their technical skills when we actually should be hiring people more for their cognitive and their people skills, and then develop the technical skills later, because quite frankly, it's harder to develop the cognitive and the people skills than it is to develop a lot of the technical skills needed in today's workplace. But I would say, hire the right people, put a team around you that wants to be involved, wants to be engaged and that's most people. When I go out and do focus groups before strategic planning, which I've done strategic planning for about 250 organizations now, and I do focus groups many times, I hear from people all the time that their managers are micromanaging them. Okay, it's almost like another pandemic, right? So this is like an organizational pandemic, is micromanaging. And you talk to the managers, the people in positions of authority, and they tell you, oh, we never micromanage around here. And you talk to the people and they say, oh my gosh, they not only tell us what to do every day, they tell us how to do it, okay, down to the intimate detail. All right, that's a matter of control. That's a matter of control. And leadership's not about controlling things. With leadership, you got to kind of let it go a little bit, right? You got to give people some flexibility, and you got to allow them to take some risks. And you got to be vulnerable, so that when they take risks and those risks don't necessarily pan out, you got to be willing to cover for them, okay, and support them even when that risk doesn't work out, and especially when the risk doesn't work out, because usually when you're bringing about adaptive change, the first thing you try doesn't always work, okay, and it's a matter of trial and error and getting back up and it takes a lot of resilience to do adaptive work. Okay, resilience. I think that's maybe a good entree or segue into the emotional intelligence that we're going to talk about on February 10th, because resilience is really at the core of emotional intelligence.
Yeah, very good. Thank you so much. Yeah, so like Dan mentioned, we do have a part 2 to this series that will be coming after the holidays. So on February 10th at 10 a.m. You can join us for part 2, which really gets into the emotional skills for leadership. If you'd like to bring Dan in-house or have him on any other topic or this topic, like I said before, feel free to give us a call at corporate training at 319-398-5623, or send us an email at corporatetraining@kirkwood.edu. I want to thank you all for joining us today. And Dan, thank you so much for your time. This was a really great session, and I look forward to seeing everybody on February 10th. Actually, Dan, if you have time, we got one more question that came in.
Okay, all right, I'm here.
Perfect. So we have a question that says, is it wrong indicating your manager isn't equal to everyone on the team?
Is it wrong saying your manager is not equal to everybody on the team? Well,
is it equal?
Isn't equal. Boy, it really depends on your organizational culture, your organizational structures. Theoretically, I would say that, the phrase first among equals comes to mind. The manager certainly has more responsibility, right? So, when you're in an organizational structure, someone has to be responsible to the next level up. Whatever level you're on, there's usually another level up, and someone's got to be responsible, and that's the manager, okay? So the manager is the person who provides some control, some organization, some structure and order, and accountability, right, up to the higher levels in the organization. So there's a sense of unequalness in management that doesn't necessarily have to be there in leadership, right? But I think in management it's important that we recognize that in management there is an authority relationship there, and it's important to organizations that there be that structure and that order. In fact, in order to lead change, I would suggest you need to have good managerial systems in place, right? Management provides for payroll on time, and everybody loves payroll on time. Management provides for IT that works, and everybody loves when our information technology works, right? Management provides for all these organizational structures and processes that need, to be orderly, okay? So I would suggest, managers are not necessarily equals to their direct reports. Now, they're equal in God's sight, okay, yeah. In terms of respect and dignity, yes, they're equals, absolutely. But in terms of organizational structure, no, there's actually a hierarchy there, and hierarchy can be important to organizational success.
All right, very good.
Okay.
We have a follow-up here. So our question asker, Pam, said, I try to allow the employees to feel comfortable to come to me for anything just because I'm the manager. I'm not above reach.
Okay, that's good, Pam. Yeah, having an open door is kind of an interesting concept. I think it's even more important to have open eyes, open ears, open mind, open heart, because I can open my door and someone comes in, right, and says, hey, Dan, you got a minute? And I say, sure, yeah, what's up? And then I go to my keyboard and I keep typing. Okay, well, yeah, that means I have an open door. But I think what's really important is that, Pam, is that we have an open mind, an open heart, open will, so that we're not distracted and we're really fully paying attention to people when they come in. And you're probably assuming that by open door. I'm just picking up on that. That's like a first step, yeah, is open door. But I know people who have an open door who don't necessarily listen, okay? They say, yeah, come on in, and then they try to, and we're gonna talk more about that with emotional intelligence, right? But, all the multitasking that goes on. When seriously, listening is a single task. It's a solo task. If you're multitasking and one task is listening, you're not really listening, okay? So what you have to do is, I would suggest, Pam, is, yeah, the open door is the first step. But more important, it's to get out and, and talk to your people, listen to them, hear their stories, ask, when there's a problem, you go to them and you say, so what do you think about this? What do you think we ought to do? And then really listen and summarize what they're saying, because summaries can be very important. It shows that you are listening, it demonstrates understanding, and it's a way to check to make sure that what you're hearing is what they're really trying to communicate to you. Yeah, open door is a good start. I would say open everything else up as well, and yeah, and I think you'll find you'll have trust and respect from your team.
Good. So then Pam also mentioned, I try to, I started to reread a previous comment. So it's not a bad thing to care too much. Our employees come to me for anything, not necessarily just work related.
Well, I would be careful there. I mean, there are some limits, right? And that's like another whole workshop too on HR. But no, I think generally speaking, we want to connect with people on a personal level. I think there's limits to that. I think some meetings get off course because they do too much of that socializing, too much chit chatting. I think I think for a minute or two at the beginning of a meeting, some chit chatting is helpful and can be really important, particularly for the extroverts in your group. But know that there's going to be some people who are going to go, okay, all right, enough of this. Let's get down to the task here. What are we here for? Let's get down to business. I've got 30 emails I need to respond to and 20 texts, and I got phone messages. So yeah, you have to kind of balance that a little bit, I would suggest, Pam. But generally speaking, yeah, you want to take an interest in people's lives, but not to the point where you have to hear every detail about the soccer game that their kid played in last weekend. Okay, so it can get to to the point where where work becomes more of a social club than it needs to be.
Very good. Great advice. Well, thank you so much, Dan. Again, thank you for your
thanks,
time
Kylie.
today.
Yep.
And we'll see all of you back, I'm sure, on the February 10th for part 2.
All right, thanks. God bless.
Take care, everyone.